Not going to be popular in politics by being nice. Not these days, right? Wrong. One of the fastest growing stars in politics is somebody who is doing nothing that social media wants him to. I'm Chris Cuomo. Welcome to the Chris Cuomo Project. James Del Talarico. Do you know that name? I think you might. You've been watching Rogan? You've been watching TikTok? You've been seeing this really sweet-faced young man who just seems to disarm people no matter what the debate is, talking about faith, talking about integrity, talking about what Jesus wanted us to do, secular as well as religious, ethical, moral, no sniping, no insults. And yet, he is a multi-term representative in the House in Texas. He's a state-level politician who is all over national airwaves. How odd. How rare. I wonder why that is. Want to know? Listen to James Talarico, and I guarantee you, at the end of this interview, you are going to say one thing. I wish he were my fill in the blank of some high office. Here is Representative Talarico proving me right. James Talarico, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
So, state representatives are not usually a national focus, but you are. Why do you think you keep getting platformed nationally? And not just by my chunky self, but the likes of Joe Rogan and all kinds of TV and digital pursuits. Why do you think it is? What's resonating?
Well, actually, you were one of the first national shows to reach out and have me on. So thank you for that. And I do think more attention needs to be put on state legislators, because this is where the real policy making is happening across the country. A lot of our media, a lot of our politics is nationalized now, and I actually think that's unproductive and unhealthy. So I'm happy that a state rep is getting attention. But more broadly, I think that the Democratic Party has a real problem and needs to get outside of its comfort zone. And so the fact that I was willing to go on Joe Rogan's podcast, I've been on Fox News, been on the Christian Broadcasting Network, meeting people where they're at and having sometimes, uncomfortable conversations with people who aren't in the Democratic coalition. That, I think, is what the party needs now more than ever. And I think that's what the attention exposes is a hunger for people who will meet people where they're at and convey a message directly to those listeners and those viewers.
Some of it was the course correction that you provide to Christians. I think that was one of the things that made you appealing. Originally, the media was probably hoping that you were just a self-hating Christian, because very often we like to market people who bash their own faith, but that's not what it is. You have taken upon yourself as a divinity student, so obviously the theology is very important to you beyond the dogma, to talk to Christians about the hypocrisy of saying you believe it, but not living it. Where does that come from, and how has it been received in and around Austin, Texas, where you serve?
Yeah, it's been interesting because some folks have called me a progressive Christian, and I understand what they mean because, politically or when it comes to policy, I do have progressive views. But in some ways, I consider myself a conservative Christian because I believe in the authority of Scripture. I believe in Christian doctrines, and so from a theological perspective, I'm pretty conservative. I take a lot of inspiration from the late Pope Francis, who was also in some ways politically progressive, but also theologically conservative. And so these terms kind of get thrown around and maybe have different meanings in different contexts. But I've gotten so many messages over the last week in particular since that Rogan interview from people all over the state, all over the country, and some people from different countries who have sent me really personal messages about their own faith journeys and their discomfort with how religion has been used in recent years, recent decades, to hurt a lot of people. And they're thankful that someone is providing a different perspective. Even if they don't agree with me on every issue, I think they're grateful someone is pushing back against some of the folks who are twisting our religion and using it to protect their own power and their own wealth.
Well, usually Christians are a one-trick pony, right? It's all about being anti-choice or anti-reproductive rights or pro-life, whatever vernacular you want. And you did pull a Bergoglio. You flip it on them and say you make your faith about what you're against instead of what you're supposed to be for, and your demonstration of loving mercy, as Bergoglio loved to talk in Buenos Aires, but also certainly as Pope Francis. Why do you think that distinction is lost, and why is it so much easier for people to be against rather than living as Jesus actually instructed?
Well, this is not unique to Christianity, right? The powerful people using religion to advance their own self-interest, that's a tale as old as time. It's been happening in our religion, since I think Emperor Constantine. That was only 300 years after Jesus was executed by the Roman Empire. So this is something we've struggled with throughout our history, right? Emperors, dictators, politicians, televangelists using our religion to push their own agenda. And the idea that Christianity is synonymous with being anti-gay and anti-abortion, that's a pretty recent phenomenon. And I don't think people realize that this is, I pointed out on that podcast interview that the Southern Baptist Convention was pro-choice until the late 70s. So this is really a phenomenon of the religious right, which is a movement that started in the late 70s, early 80s, with Ronald Reagan, with Jerry Falwell, with some of those figures. And it has just gone unchallenged, I think, in this country. I mean, Jimmy Carter, may have been one of the last, Democratic elected officials who really spoke passionately about his evangelical faith. And we haven't really seen that. You've got Raphael Warnock, who I think the world of, but we need way more folks who are pushing back against that narrative and creating space for people to have different views on these topics. Now, I want to clarify, Christians who are anti-abortion, I think I respect that position. I do. I just talked about Pope Francis. He was anti-abortion, and at least he was consistent in that pro-life view, right? He was anti-abortion, but he was also anti-poverty. He was anti-climate change. He was anti-war. So he was very consistent, and I respect that. And I am always willing to sit down with a fellow believer who may come to a different opinion about the issue of abortion, as long as it feels like they are serious and consistent morally on that issue and on other issues. And so all I'm trying to do is provide a little space for those who come to a different theological place on the issue of abortion to still be allowed in this community, this in the church. And it feels like for the last 40 years, if you're pro-choice and you're a Christian, you're kind of seen by many folks in the church as not a real Christian because it's become so synonymous. And so I'm trying to push back against that a little bit.
So why Rogan, and how did you interpret his seeming to be completely overwhelmed by you on that podcast? I mean, he is generally an active listener. And he, that podcast is often, it's a platform for many things, but when it comes to political ideology, it tends to play to the fringe and conspiracies and all this other nonsense. And he has you on, and he seemed completely in awe of you and wanted you to be president as soon as you left the studio.
Well, I don't know how serious he was about that, but I do think it was a real connection that we made on that show. I was struck by how open and curious he is. And that, in my experience as being a politician, those are the best interviewers. It actually reminds me a lot of you, as someone who actually is in the conversation. Sometimes you have an interviewer who has a list of questions. They're just going through it. Maybe even sometimes they're trying to do gotchas, right? They're trying to pin you down and create a moment. But the best interviewers are people who are genuinely curious about who you are, where you come from, how you're thinking about these things. It feels like a real human conversation that you would have with a friend or a family member or at a bar. And when you can do that on a big platform like this or like the Rogan podcast, I think it's really attractive to people. Now I agree. Sometimes that openness can get you in a little bit of trouble because you may have some people who have some questionable views on your show. But I would rather have someone who is much more open than someone who's more closed. I think it creates an opportunity to have real understanding between two people, and that's just so rare in our civic discourse these days.
Support comes from Mando. Got to tell you something. I sweat like a farm animal. Mando works. Okay? Mando works. Here's what I know. I'm an Old Spice guy. I use it. I don't want the aluminum. I don't want the bad stuff. My wife runs a wellness business called Purist, P-U-R-I-S-T, and I don't want her on my case. Mando checks every box. Doesn't have any of the bad stuff, and it smells good, and it works. And again, I am a little fat, and I sweat a lot all summer long. And this has absolutely helped with the pit situation. Clinically proven to control odor better than a shower with soap alone. 12 hours after a shower, the average man's grundle odor, which happened to have been Greg's nickname in high school, grundle odor level was a 5 out of 10. With Mando, the average grundle odor level, 0 out of 10. Don't let your grundle be the story, okay? Use Mando. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. Comes with the solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice. You got the mini body wash, which is a nice deal to have. I keep those on the boat with my deodorant wipes. Free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get 20% off site-wide with our exclusive code. Use the code Cuomo at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide and free shipping. shopmando.com. Please support the Chris Cuomo Project. Tell them Cuomo sent you. Mando's got you covered. Protect your pits, my brothers and sisters, and smell great doing it. So here's why I wanted you to come back on, James. One is because I believe what you're saying is missing in your party. And I care about your party for 2 reasons. One, I'm stuck in a binary system that I have complete contempt for, but I am stuck in it. Me too. So I would love to have more parties. I would love for the political parties to have much less control over our process and have it be less about outside money. But a lot of that is legal. A lot of that is tradition. And I'm stuck in it because all the powerful prefer it. The second reason is I was raised by a real one, a real Christian philosopher, politician who you remind me of in terms of how thoughtful you are about your positions. I mean, you and my father, Mario, have very different upbringings and ethnic backgrounds, but your doxology and your idea about your faith is very similar. And you both face the same problem in different eras. Your party is running in the opposite direction of where you are. They got beat by MAGA, and they believe that a populist movement that grabs real grievance, not fake. That was the mistake that the left made with MAGA. You thought they were posers and fakers. The grievance is real. The disaffection is real. The affordability issues are real. The anger is real. And your party is now leaning into it because it beat you. And they are not saying the kinds of things that you're saying. What do you think of that?
I think if your viewers haven't listened to your father's 1984 convention speech, The Tale of Two Cities, I think it is the best encapsulation of what it means to be a Democrat. It's what the Democratic Party should be. a focus on people who are left out and left behind. And it feels like we've strayed from that over the last few years, maybe the last few decades. But I do think that there is a moment here for a Democratic Party that remembers its roots, remembers its heritage, FDR and LBJ from my state, or Mario Cuomo from your state. You know, that legacy is so needed right now when we have such division, we have such concentrated wealth and power, we have such a corrupt political system. We've got the greatest chasm between the haves and the have-nots that we've ever seen. We are desperate for an old school Democratic Party. And so, you know, people are saying what I'm doing is new. I actually think it's very old. And it's something that we have to get back in touch with if we're going to not just win elections, because that's not really the point. The point is to get political power to make people's lives better. That's the ultimate goal. And if we can't change how we're connecting with people, then we're not going to gain political power. We're not going to make a difference in this country. So that's what I'm trying to do is help our party reconnect with its historical roots, because I think it has so much to offer during this moment of crisis in our country.
So I was seeing something the other day that I wanted to get your comment on. So I was watching clips of you at some community meetings, or they were legislative hearings or something like that. And I thought it was interesting because you were doing it in your own way, and you were way on the right side of the line of fairness. But the clips were going kind of viral because you were playing a form of kind of gotcha with different people who were bringing up weird bills or whatever it was. There were a couple of different examples. And it didn't worry me, but I didn't know how to take it because, look, that is the currency right now. You have to be owning the other side. You have to show that they are worse, that they are stupid, they are to be feared and opposed. You're not using that kind of language. I want to be very clear. But I did feel that you were, I worry about the same thing with Buttigieg. You're very bright. You're very articulate. You know what you're talking about better than most people you deal with because you take the time to think and prepare. But there is a risk that you use it as a sword in politics, and it will be well received, and it is. The clips are doing very, very well. But is there something you have to be careful about in that?
Yes. I'm so thankful you asked about this, because this is something I think about constantly. I think the difference that I try to focus on is the difference between owning an idea or a bad bill versus owning a person. The difference between saying that an idea is bad, or an idea is harmful, or an idea lacks kind of logical consistency. That, I think, is very important, because in a democracy, we have to have a rigorous debate about ideas, right? That's how this is all supposed to work. And you have to be able to, this is again something I think my party struggles with, you have to make the argument, right? Sometimes Democrats, especially in recent years, we just think, well, we're right, and everyone who disagrees with us is clearly wrong, or they're bigoted, or they're racist, right? Misogynistic. And we don't want to engage with that. I think the opposite. In democracy, you win by persuading people. So you have to make that argument. You've got to win the debate. But there is a huge difference between beating an idea and beating a person, meaning saying that an idea is bad versus a person is bad. And so the line I try to walk, and I think to your point, I fail all the time at this. It's a difficult line to walk. It's how do you vigorously contest the idea or the bill or the legislation while still holding space for that person's humanity as a bearer of the divine image, as we would describe it in our faith. That is a real tricky line to walk. I do think I've been able to do it successfully in some instances, and some of the best feedback I get is, I really appreciate in this video how polite you were. And respectful you were to your opponent. To me, that's the best feedback I can get, which is I made a good argument. I used logic and reason and passion and rhetoric. Rhetoric was an art form a long time ago before it became a pejorative. Using all those things to win a debate, but still loving and respecting my opponent, loving and respecting my enemy, as Scripture calls us to do. That's the line, and it's always so tricky. And I agree, the media environment creates these temptations, right? Because if you own somebody, if you say someone is an evil person, man, you can get more clicks and more views and more followers than you can imagine, right? If you adopt those kind of Trumpian tactics of just degrading a person and kind of brutalizing a person, that can be very successful. And for an elected official like me, that's a temptation, right? Because I want my message to spread. I want to win the next election. And so it's resisting that temptation as much as I can and loving my enemies while I still fight for what I believe in. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the line that I see that's super important not to cross.
I think you have it exactly right. And by the way, I never said the word fail because you didn't fail. You succeeded.
I do fail at it.
But you succeeded in the game as it is played. And the problem you have is, and I don't know what the right advice is, I wish I did, is that the commodity, the currency, the coin of the realm is not what you do. And my caution to people is it never works out for anybody but Trump. Anybody who goes down that road, whether it's Ted Cruz, any righty you want to pick, and now you're seeing it on the left with Crockett and AOC, and it never works out because here's my fundamental axiom. It's not a theory, but America is about sweet strength, not harshness. We are not bullies. Now, people will shake their head at that, and they will say, what are you talking about? You guys are so violent. That's different. There is an outrage. There is a violence to us as a people. There's no question about it, maybe uniquely so. But America at her best is not a bully. We hate bullies here. And we have become a bullying political culture, especially in the digital space, especially on Rogan's podcast. The Pod Brothers, it's a really tricky thing for me, James, because unlike you are very sophisticated emotionally and intellectually, especially for a young guy. And I don't mean to condescend. That's the problem in your party. But I'm an old guy, right? I'm 55. And I actually could never be in elected office because I actually am a fairly rough around the edges, violent guy. Like I could do something stupid pretty much at all times, which is why we can do better than me as an elected leader. But you are in a tough spot because what is rewarded is not what's right. And you know that. And it's almost like you have to have the patience, thank God you are young, that it will come back around to reasonable, to not just left and right in this battle to the bottom, but like, can this actually be fixed? Do we have to hate each other all the time unless there's a bigger boogeyman who scares all of us at once? That's where your sweet spot is going to be. And I just hope the timing works out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that analysis. But the only thing I'd push back on is I do feel, and I think, this reaction to that Rogan podcast proves that earnestness and sincerity and compassion and understanding are going to make a comeback. I don't know that for sure. In my cynical days, I think we may be in a descending spiral that we can't get out of. But on my hopeful days, I see how people respond to this. And the thing the feedback I've gotten the most since that Rogan interview is the phrase breath of fresh air, right? Like a breeze kind of blowing through the political discourse. You know this, Chris, there's one of my favorite verses in scripture is Matthew 5:5, the meek shall inherit the earth. Again, that doesn't seem like it would be true, right? I mean, you look throughout history and you're like, no, it's the powerful. It's the bullies that inherit the earth. They're the ones who win. But the countercultural thing about Christianity is this belief that, yes, violence may win in the short run, right? Jesus was crucified on Good Friday. He lost on Good Friday. But on Easter Sunday, something else wins in the long run, right? Love ultimately prevails in the long run. And that's you can see that in nature, right? The wind takes out the mountain in the long run. The water takes out the rock in the long run, even though it's softer. But over time, it is more powerful. And so I guess that's the long-term bet I'm making, is that love and compassion are going to win in the long run. It may not win you, immediate views on social media. It may not win you the next election, but I do think that this is what people ultimately want. The other stuff is it's like empty calories, right? It feels like food, but it doesn't actually nourish you in the long run. I do believe that we are made by love for love, as children of God, and so I do think it's where our heart longs to be at the end of the day, even if we do, trip on the way there. So that's just that. Again, that's faith. I have nothing to prove that. It is a leap of faith, but I don't know. I think people may be ready for it again. It may make a comeback.
Support comes from Shopify. Now, Shopify is really important, as I've learned, in starting a small business, okay? It's hard to start a small business. It's hard to get people to care about what you want them to look at and consider. And the more you look at small businesses that are successful, the more you see that it's about who they're doing business with to create their own success. And that's where Shopify comes in. If you need help in getting people to go from checking out what you have all the way through to checkout of buying it, that's where Shopify comes in. They take so much of the homework and headwork out of e-commerce. Okay, it's overwhelming to figure out logos, scheduling, branding, advertising, where, how, what's the angle. So, Shopify can do all of that for you, and it is an amazing tool in that regard, and it becomes a game changer, and that's why millions of businesses use Shopify to create more commerce on their platforms, okay? Millions of businesses, 10% of all e-commerce in the US, Shopify. Household names, Mattel, Gymshark, right? To a lot of startups. Sign up for your $1 a month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Chris C. $1 a month. How can you beat that? Just go to shopify.com/Chris C. Shopify.com/Chris C. So now you look at yourself as a reflection of the party. The righteousness of the grievance is real, and I'm okay with it. You have angry people who are rightfully upset at their lot in life and how the system seems to be a burden rather than a benefit. On the right as on the left. I mean, that's what you guys were the union working class party. I mean, that's what Mario Cuomo was. He was underclass all day. He wasn't even considered a white guy. I am, right. But that's he right. was an ethnic, Right. So it's the remedies that I worry about for you guys, that MAGA was playing with a lot of culture stuff. It's easy to say, I don't want my 12-year-old daughter playing against someone's Cuomo's size,
Sure.
I get it. This almost never happens, but yeah, I get it. That's a tough argument. Not easy to win. Yeah. But the remedies that I'm hearing coming from the left now, the comfort with calling yourselves socialists, when you know that word is a death sentence. If you have to explain in politics, you are losing. Yeah. And you have to explain from jump why you're saying, capitalism is no good. We got to look at more socialistic. And I'm hearing it more and more in your party. What do you make of that? What do you do with that?
I think it actually comes back to the way a lot of folks in my party have lost touch with religion and spirituality. I mean, so many of the successful progressive social movements, you mentioned the labor movement, civil rights movement, farm workers movement, they were rooted in religion. I mean, the American civil rights movement was an explicitly Christian movement. Now, of course, there were allies from other faiths. Jewish rabbis were out there on the front lines marching with Dr. King, but the organizing was done in churches. And Dr. King was a pastor, first and foremost, before he was anything else. And I think that's so important because they were rooted in something deeper than the kind of, the ups and downs of a political fight. And I worry that, socialism, communism, even capitalism these things can become religions, right? They become dogmas. And when you don't have something else to root yourself in, so you start rooting yourself in political philosophies or economic theories, right? When in reality, right, the United States is a mix of all of these things, right? We have free market system, but we also have Social Security and Medicare, and public education and public libraries. So the idea that you would somehow lean into an ideology in such a pure way, as if we want to be completely capitalistic or socialistic, right? That one doesn't reflect the reality of what this country is and what's made it great. I oftentimes think in terms of economic policy, I do want to go back to the 1950s when we had shared prosperity and when we were growing together. That to me does sound like making America great again, is getting back to that economic system we had in the middle of the 20th century. But so I do think there's a danger in when people in my party lose touch with faith or spirituality, you start to believe in some of these political philosophies or economic philosophies, and you act like those are your religion. And that can be incredibly dangerous, and it makes you myopic and unwilling to listen to other perspectives or test ideas, right? Like let's see if a policy works and be okay to admit when it doesn't work, or if a program doesn't work. We should be okay of trying new things and seeing what's actually effective based on experience and data. And you can't do that when it becomes your religion.
Do you see an advance in extremism in our political culture, if not our culture overall? And how do you believe we combat it? Context, the shootings at the Israeli embassy, this healthcare CEO, Minnesota, the politicians, what we just saw in New York City. It seems to me that we used to, I'm old enough to remember, when we were afraid of the extremist without, now they are all homegrown and seem to be susceptible to social media extremism, that it's all okay. This guy who was clearly diseased of mind, who just shot up the building in Manhattan, he is getting support online. He's dead, but he's getting support online. This is what the NFL gets. This is what the corporate elite get. This is what happens when you ignore people who are hurting. That is extremism. We've never in America condoned violence as a methodology for political change until now, I think. Am I right? Am I wrong? And how do you see it?
No, I think you're completely right. All I would say is we should recognize how these systems encourage this, right? Sometimes I worry that we make this so individualistic, so personal, where we have extreme people in our politics, which is true, but I think we don't recognize how these systems promote more extreme rhetoric, more extreme policymaking, not just our media systems, which, we've already talked about, but like these social media algorithms, these platforms, they get more clicks and more profit when there's more extreme, outlandish statements that are made or extreme and outlandish actions that are taken. They're profiting off the extremism. So it's literally encouraging it, right? I mean, all of us see this, right? If you post something reasonable, or you post a conversation where you're actually breaking through and having some kind of mutual understanding between two people, that doesn't get a lot of clicks and views. But if you've got folks who are throwing expletives at each other, it's gonna grab attention, right? And attention is as you mentioned, the coin of the realm now. And so I do want us to recognize that we are kind of being played. We are being pitted against each other by these giant platforms that are profiting off of our divisions. But there's also systems within our politics. So I think of gerrymandering and redistricting, which is obviously a fight that's happening now in Texas. But I when I got elected, I represented a swing district. I won the district with 51% of the vote. Donald Trump had won the district by 1 point the election before I won that seat. So it was a classic district where you had a mix of people. And it was great to represent that district because it forced me as a politician to listen and appeal to everybody, right? Because I couldn't just win with Democrats. I couldn't just win with my people. I had to build a big tent, a big coalition. I was targeted in the 2020 redistricting by my Republican colleagues. They basically cracked my district in half and destroyed my seat. The only way I survived is because a seat next door where I happened to grow up opened up. The Democratic rep went on and ran for something else. So I moved about a mile down the road and ran in the seat where I grew up. That seat, though, is a heavily Democratic district, the district I have now. I think Joe Biden won my district with 75% of the vote, something crazy. And that is how most districts are these days. Most districts are deep blue or deep red. And just think about the incentives that puts in front of a politician, right? We can hope that elected officials have profiles and courage, but let's not pretend that that's a regular occurrence. They are self-interest. We are self-interested actors trying to win re-election. And so if your district is a deep blue district or a deep red district, the only threat to your re-election is your extreme flank.
Right.
In a primary. Right? You don't have to worry. The general is predetermined because of gerrymandering.
Right.
And so the only threat is your primary. So I say all that just to recognize that the systems we have encourage extremism. And so, yeah, you could replace Marjorie Taylor Greene, but someone's just going to take her spot because the systems demand someone like that.
Yep.
And so until we can actually reform the system on all these different levels, the media systems, the political systems, we're not going to see different outcomes in our politics.
Support comes from iRestore. Listen to this. I got good personal insight for you. So I ran out of my iRestore serum, and I ran out of my iRestore thickening shampoo, even though I'm not shampooing my hair as often because my daughters and my son told me that I was overwashing my hair. And I'll tell you what, I feel like my hair is not as thick as it was. It's been like 3 weeks now. For me, I think iRestore has been working because I got the iRestore Revive Plus Max Growth Kit. Okay, and it's like the full-on hair care dream team, right? You got the root to tip system, the advanced hair growth formula, right? The thickening shampoo, the thickening conditioner, right? The growth activator serum, that's what I ran out of. Ingredients like Lustriva, Redensil, Biotin, Capixul, all clinically backed to fight thinning and boost scalp health. iRestore has done the research and they've got their red light technology. That's what's in the helmet. That could be the game changer, okay? And I don't know which one it is, but I'm telling you, I felt a difference. Give yourself the gift of hair confidence. Limited time, subscribe and save, 25% off or more, and free shipping on the iRestore Revive Plus Max Growth Kit. And our listeners are getting a huge discount on the iRestore Elite device when you use the code Chris at iRestore.com. So head over to iRestore.com, use the code Chris, and you'll get my show's exclusive discounts. Please support our show. Tell them Cuomo sent you. The approval rating for Congress is somewhere around my vertical leap, like 20 inches or something like that. And yet the reelection rate is over 95%.
Exactly.
So that doesn't exist in any other market system unless there are controls. And that's what we see. And that is the poison of the party. And that is how the few wind up dominating the many. And everything that happens gets passed through this, whether it's war in the Middle East, or war anywhere, or a shooting anywhere. Everything must be processed through the lens of which side is it worse for. And you see this even with something that is as absurd as the Epstein situation. It was only a matter of time before Trump had to say, well, you better look at Clinton. What about what Obama did? The only way out of anything these days is to show that there's more reason to be pissed at the other side. It's all that works. How do you get out of it?
I think the system itself has to be reformed. And I know this feels like process. It feels like inside baseball. you talk to any political consultant and they'll be like, don't talk about redistricting. No one knows what that is, right? Like, you got to talk about healthcare and education. Of course, those are issues that I care deeply about and do a lot of work on. But until we actually, reform the system itself, redistricting, money in politics, social media platforms, until the structures are fixed, we're not going to see progress on those issues that we care about. We're not going to see a shared prosperity in this country. We're not going to see good public schools. We're not going to see universal health care. The system itself has to be fixed first. And so I know that is complicated and it takes a lot of explaining, but I don't know. I think people are ready to be talked to like adults. I do. I think the American people, maybe they don't know all the inside out, of the political system, but they know something is broken and they're ready for people who will explain it clearly and provide some real solutions that could make the system work for everybody again.
If you could get people to allow the solutions. The problem is that they won't change. I mean, the beautiful issue in this regard is actually a very ugly issue that you live with intimately in Texas, which is immigration. Everybody knows the fixes. All you have to do is talk to anybody who works the line, and they'll tell you that the main thing they want is more processing ability and different rules.
Right.
Everybody knows that, but you'll never get it because the problem works better than the solutions. Now, it's been skewed a little bit because the Democrats screwed it up so bad that it created an opportunity for a harshness that Trump grasped and is now did well with it. Now, I think he's got overreach with the ICE deportations, and he's lost the majority on that. So there's a little bit of flux going on. But people aren't in the solutions business, Mr. Talarico, which brings me to what the ultimate question is for you. Does Talarico stay in politics? Do you want to move up in terms of your ability to affect change? Do you think you're built for it? Do you think you have the appetite for it?
These are the questions I'm struggling with right now, and doing a lot of praying and reflecting on that. I feel like I'm in a period of discernment in my public service career, and I'm wrestling with these questions because, I made the decision to go to seminary in my second term, largely because I just felt like I was hitting a brick wall in my public service as a state rep, and I didn't feel like I was making the progress that I wanted to make, and making the impact I wanted to make, and so I was kind of questioning the whole thing. And the only thing that pulled me out of that spiral was going to seminary, because I think it provided, again, those roots into something a lot deeper than the kind of the daily back and forth, the fights, the corruption of our current political system. And I am trying to figure out if I can make more of an impact in the ministry, because I do think that, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm talking about my faith and how it should inform, our life together in this state, in this country. And I'm flooded with comments from Gen Z and millennials who are just like, I've never heard this. Like, I've been looking for this perspective. I've had comments of like, if I had heard this when I was younger, I'd still be in the church. I've gotten personal messages from people who say,
if they had a pastor like you. See, that's the problem with the church. The church is just a building. It's all about the man or woman inside of it and how they inspire you. I'm on the board of the Passionists, which is a religious community within Catholicism. And there are so many. They don't run dioceses. They have a couple, but they don't do that. They do traveling ministries. And I've often said to a man who you've probably seen on TV named Father Edward Beck, he looks like Anderson Cooper, like oddly like Anderson Cooper. And they have both been on CNN. They were there with me, and he was there after I got fired. And I often said to him, Edward, not just because I love you and you're my friend, man, if you were a pastor in a church, I would go twice a week. I would be there midweek and I'd see you again Sunday, because you bring it alive for me. You animate it for me. You help me with it as a living instruction. But that's in short supply, brother, especially not just in the church, but in public service.
I disagree with you that it's in short supply in the church, because I'm going to seminary with some incredible young, again, millennial and Gen Z pastors in training. who are talking about the same things I'm talking about, but they don't have the platform right now. But
but you're in the Protestant church.
Yes, Presbyterian.
Right. I'm talking about
my granddad was Baptist. I'm Presbyterian.
I'm talking about in the Catholic Church. I mean, they barely making priests anymore.
I mean, that is true. I do think that rather than just following a guy on social media who you like, I do think you need to be in an actual community.
Yes.
Flesh and blood, in a physical place, right? Instagram and TikTok are poor substitutes for community. But what I could do with this platform is I could help people find those communities or build those communities across the state, across the country. And that's really exciting for me.
Well, that's your answer, James.
And it may be more of an impact than running for a statewide office.
No, I see it the other way.
I don't know.
I see it the other way. I think that the ministry is the cornerstone, but the edifice is built through the service. And the more reach you have, the better. The problem is, and my father had this problem too, to bring it back to Pop, the inspiration is huge. I would argue it is the most important commodity in politics, is capturing the imagination of people and giving them reason to believe, and for them to then motivate the doing. Yeah. But the problem is inspiration, yes. Aspiration, yes. Perspiration, getting things done. Yes. So then you get some guy like me who runs against Talarico, and when I'm not busy lying about your past, I say, yeah, but he didn't do it, but he didn't do it, but they never did it, but they never did it. And that always works because it's almost impossible to get anything done because there is a legitimate position to just be opposing these days. I stopped Talarico and his crazy lefty pals from doing what they wanted to do. Vote for me. Sure. And that's the trick for someone like you, is to be inspirational, but also productive in a dynamic where people do not want you to get things done, because then you are dangerous.
Well, and it's part of why I don't want to go to Washington, because I can still get stuff done here at the state capitol. I mean, we were talking about how it's so nationalized. There's less of a spotlight here at the state legislature. And so I can still work with my Republican colleagues across the aisle. I passed a bill to allow incarcerated minors to graduate from high school. And I got to go speak at the first graduation in the prison and see these kids who are now able to turn their lives around. I passed the first ever cap on pre-K class sizes. I mean, we had pre-K classrooms here in Texas with 30, 40 kids in them because there was no limit to how many kids are in a classroom. And I was able to fix that. I passed a huge early childhood bill that's going to raise the quality of early childhood providers across the state and give them more funding. And early childhood is a game changer when it comes to brain development and giving kids that head start they need before kindergarten. I passed the first insulin price cap here in Texas, a $25 copay cap. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and when I got diagnosed, I was 28 years old. I went to Walgreens to get my first 30-day supply of insulin. It cost me $684 for a 30-day supply of this medicine that I needed to live. And I was able to take that experience and then pass a copay cap so that other Texans don't have to go through that. So I'm making progress here at the state level. I am worried and I am fearful that won't be possible at the national level. And so it is part of the hesitance of running for something like U.S. Senate. I want to stop Ken Paxton from being my senator. I was part of the bipartisan coalition that impeached Ken Paxton for his corruption. So the idea of him being our U.S. senator is deeply worrying to me. But that said, I'm not sure that D.C. is a place where I can make the kind of progress I've made here.
That's a tough call. I mean, look, it is and it isn't. It's only a tough call because of the vanity of it. And that is what people do, is that more, the eternal quest for more, as we talk about in our theology, the eternal quest for more. And it's never enough if it's about the agglomeration of power. And it is hard to argue unless you get deep, deep, deep into the faith of reform, that the U.S. Senate is a place to get something done, because right now it's no longer the most deliberative body in the world. It used to be. I grew up with those guys. I grew up with Moynihan and Al D'Amato, and these guys who are like much deeper cats than what we see right now. Now it's just an extension of the House being in the Senate. So, I mean, I guess if you were trying to make it back into what it was, then there is an ambition there. But otherwise, you'll only be what you put out in your TikTok. That's all you'll be, because you'll never get anything done.
Right. And I value the work I do connecting with people outside of the Capitol. Like, I think that's necessary to move public opinion, to inspire people, to organize people, to change the system. It is going to come from outside. It's not going to come from inside in my theory of change. But to just do that and not actually be making progress within the building, that doesn't nourish me and doesn't sustain me. I have to be able to do both. And I am very worried about whether that's possible in a place like Washington.
When do you have to make a decision about what you do next?
We got the special session here in Austin. It's going to last until the end of August, unless another one is called. We haven't even seen these new maps, so we're kind of we're right in the middle of this redistricting fight. And I was hired to do a job by my constituents, 200,000 people in Central Texas. And I've got to do that job before I start applying to other jobs, right?
Now,
so
you are right,
that's
James,
where my focus is right now.
But again, I don't, it's funny. I really don't talk about my father that often. But not be careful, but be aware. Yes, they hired you to do a job. But what they really hired you to be was their agent, was their advocate. Yeah. My father didn't run for president for two reasons, and neither of them was because we're in the mob, okay, which is what everybody assumed. The first one was very worthy. The second one was not. The very worthy reason was that my father did not believe he was good enough to be president, and a relative assessment was irrelevant to him. If you were to say to him, you don't think you can beat this chump Talarico? He would say, that is Talarico's question. My question is, am I good enough? And my answer is, no, I don't think so. Wow. The second reason was connected to the first. And I'm not good enough because I was hired to balance the budget, and I can't get the budget done. So how can I run on fiscal responsibility when my own budget is held up in the state by the legislature? So they won't let me run because I can't get this done. Now, I found that even as an 18-year-old lacking, because, well, of course they weren't going to pass the budget if it meant you were going to run. The Republicans didn't want you to run because you had a shot. So they were trying to help their party by keeping you where you were. And nobody cares whether or not you pass that budget or you get done with this redistricting calendar. It's all about whether or not you are in a position to advocate for their interests. So don't think that just because this job's not done yet, you can't do a different job, because there is a transferability to the need. They need what they believe in about you in the largest way possible. Yeah. Because it's you that they're betting on, not the position. And so don't pull a Mario where you don't run. Don't run if you don't want to run, but don't run because you think, well, I haven't finished this yet. They know you're not going to finish it. They know you probably can't even finish it, that there's no currency in finishing it. There's just currency in blaming people for being unfinished. That's why we love debt ceiling brinksmanship. We love it on the federal level. Whose fault is it going to be? Who's going to screw it up? Right. That's where we are, and it needs to change, but it ain't going to change today. And the higher you are up the food chain, the better a position you're in to make a real change.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because that's very helpful. It is a paradox in our politics that, if we were in the 1980s in New York City, like you were, the idea that Donald Trump would be president and not Mario Cuomo. I mean, to me, it's like to have a man with such character and integrity not think that he's good enough, and then you have a man who lacks a lot of those things, feel like, of course, that he could do it. That is kind of the tension in democracy. The people who have the ambition and the I would say maybe arrogance to think you can make decisions for, 200,000 Central Texans or 400 million Americans. That attracts a certain kind of person, and it discourages certain kinds of people, like your dad, or maybe like me. And that's I don't know what we do about that, but it hadn't really occurred to me until you shared that.
You got to change people's perception of what they're hiring. So Trump is a better fit. Look, Mario Cuomo was a tough guy. He was from South Jamaica, Queens. He'd been, grown up as an underclass. He was very aware of it. He was a legitimate anti-elitist. Right. Other than when I left the law to go into the media, when I went to an Ivy League school, I've never seen my father more depressed. When he was like, "You want to go to those people?" He was a real one. It wasn't some artifice like it is today. He wasn't anti-success. He just was anti those people in their closed club. Yeah. But if you're hiring for someone to go into a dirty business and punish the people who are in it, Trump is the right guy over Talarico or Cuomo, because you and guys like my dad are not knee breakers. You are not going to do somebody dirty because it's how you get it done. You would be forever. That's why they called him Hamlet on the Hudson. He could not easily convince himself to do what was expedient when he knew it was wrong. Trump is unburdened by any larger principle other than the pragmatism of the moment. If it's good for him, the answer is yes. That's why someone can come and punch his kid in the face and then next week make a deal with him and he'll be okay with it. He's transactional. That's what matters.
Life is easier that way.
And there is an argument to be made that in the current system, Trump is American politics. Yeah. He is exactly what our politics is right now. Yeah. You change what people want, and he becomes an impossibility in terms of being elected. And you'll see his party. When he's done, they're going to run right back to character counts, James. They're running right back to it. And they're going to get all churched up again. And they're going to say, oh, no, this is who we've always been. They just can't be it right now because of Trump. But they're going to be right back on, that they are the party of God. They're the Christians. They're not these godless lefties who are embracing these crazy Muslims and everybody else. We're the real ones. You'll see. As soon as he's gone, they're going right back to that. So I would love to keep checking in. I love that you are resonating the way you are and for the reasons that you are. You are a breath of fresh air. Yes, because we are in a really fetid, stale period. And it is good to see somebody getting notice for not being notorious.
Well, thank you for saying that. And thank you again for taking a chance on me, because you had me on your TV show long before I got all this other attention. And so just want to thank you for that.
I told you, you wish that guy was representing you in state or federal government. Why? Smart AF and driven by the right kinds of ambitions. Now, can he make it in this toxic soup that we call the two-party system? I hope so. I don't give a damn that he's a Democrat. I like him despite the fact that he's a Democrat, because he's not in step with his own party. But I think that the measured nature, the reasonableness, the reliance on real wisdom and real virtue is so refreshing. And I got past the idea that it's not realistic. I mean, he's too much of an ideologue. I don't buy it. I think it's everything else that's going on in our system that's artificial. I actually think that's the authentic nature of leadership. What do you think? I'm Chris Cuomo. Thank you for subscribing and following me, checking me out on News Nation, 8 p and 11 p every weekday night. Joining the Substack, signing up so I can give the money to people trying to get long COVID treatment. And if you sign up and pay, I will be getting your questions and your comments, and that's what I'll deal with in my lives every week. So I'll see you there. And if you want to wear your independence, get your free agent gear. And I'll see you right here at the Chris Cuomo Project. Let's get after it.